everybody, and welcome. You may have already seen my video, 9 tips for how to shorten your school day and year. However, I've noticed in some of the chat groups that I'm in, specifically with BJU moms, that many of you are looking for ways to shorten your school day, especially with BJU online products. Now, first of all, I just want to let you know that you're not alone. This is a very common question, especially for parents who are just starting out using BJU's video products. You know, many of us have the expectation that with homeschool, our school days should be a lot shorter than the traditional schools. And that is, in my opinion, 100% accurate. Our school days should be shorter because we don't have all of the extra stuff of having to wrangle a classroom of 20 kids to keep focused. And we don't have to go back and reiterate concepts for some of the children who aren't getting it while other children do get it. We can let our children move at their own pace. We can move at our own pace, and we should be able to be a lot more efficient with our time than if we were bound to a school schedule. So if that's been your expectation, and yet you have found it a challenge to do that, this video is for you. I'm going to give you 5 tips to immediately shorten your BJU online school day. Now, a little background on where I'm coming from. We've been using BJU Press's online videos and curriculum for almost 12 years now. We started when my daughter was 4, and actually she's now about to graduate, having used their products all along the way. And we also have her 3 younger brothers in BJU's curriculum as well. It has worked beautifully for us. However, we've learned how to tweak things and find our own rhythm with it. This is one thing that I encourage everyone who purchases BJU to understand. BJU is excellent at giving you more than enough to accomplish your educational goals for your children. They are going to arm you with every tool, every help, every handout that you could possibly need to achieve the comprehension that you need on various concepts. Now, because they give you so much, it's easy to become overwhelmed and feel like you have to use every single thing they give you. If you haven't already, I encourage you to head over after this video and watch my video on the curriculum buffet. We really need to look at our curriculum as an all-you-can-eat buffet. If we try to eat everything on the buffet, we're going to be miserable. We're going to burn out. It's not going to work out well for us. But if we learn how to pick and choose what we need for a nutritious, satisfying meal, so to speak, it's going to be a beautiful experience. Where things go south is when we put all of this pressure on ourselves to do everything exactly the way it's laid out, and we don't give ourselves any flexibility to adapt it to our own needs and to our children's needs. So with that said, I want to give you 5 practical tips on how to make that happen for you. The very first one, I have to give credit to my kids because they came up with it, but it makes a world of difference when you're trying to do video curriculum. Very first tip, adjust the playback speed. Keep in mind that these videos are being taught by well-credentialed professional teachers who have trained themselves to discuss things at a pace that everybody in the class can understand. So chances are when it's your child sitting there with an iPad, maybe some headphones, depending on what your setup is, and they're zeroed into what the teacher is saying, they can probably listen a bit faster than they would in a classroom. So take the liberty, let your kids have some fun, and bump that playback speed up at least to 1.25 times. Really, my kids start at 1.5 times and sometimes push the envelope to 1.75. There have been a few rare times I've let them watch their teachers at 2 times playback speed. My general rule of thumb is if I can sit next to them and I can still understand the teacher and comprehend what's being said, then I'm okay with the speed. Sometimes the kids get a little ambitious and they just want to get done with it. So they may go a little faster and I make them slow it down a little bit. But you think about it, even just at 1.5 times, that takes a 20-minute video to 15 minutes. That's already throughout the course of your day going to make up some difference. Not only that, but just in the sense of morale, it just, something feels better about saying, I need to watch 15 minutes of a video as opposed to 20 minutes. It just feels more achievable for some reason. So if your child says, oh no, I don't want to do this today, it's a 20-minute video, well, okay, but watch it on 1.5 times and it'll only take 15 minutes. So tip 1 for shortening your day is let's play back some of those videos faster. Actually, let's play back all of them faster than the original speed. Tip number 2, shorten the assignments. Now, I know that you're wanting to make sure that there's comprehension, that you haven't skipped over anything. And I know that the fear is that you don't want to go too fast. And I get that, but also trust your instincts that you can gauge where your child is at. If you're working on a math assignment and say the online teacher says to do the odd problems, well, that's wonderful. That's already cut, say, 40 problems down to 20. But what if you take it a step further and say, you know what, you seem to be doing really well on this lesson. Why don't you show me that you can do 3 problems in this section at the top, 2 problems in the middle section, and 1 of these word problems at the bottom. And if your child can do those, then what's the problem with going ahead and moving on? And you just cut that assignment in half, maybe even thirds, depending on how detailed that page was. A lot of times I let them skip the backs of the assignments. So perhaps they do the front page. Now, not necessarily if they did it with the teacher and the teacher showed them everything, but if they've already done the front page independently and got most of it right, I'm not going to necessarily make them turn the page over and do what is often redundant. It's just more practice of the same concepts on the back page. So there are ways that you can expedite the assignments, and they're not really going to miss the material as long as they just demonstrate that understanding. And that's completely up to you to gauge and to decide as you move forward. But that can take a math lesson down from, say, an hour. If you had a 20-minute video and 40 minutes of assignment to do afterwards, that could take that hour down significantly. If you get your video down to 15 minutes and then you cut your homework, so to speak, your work text down from 40 minutes to, say, 20, already you've cut out a good bit of time from your school day. The third tip is to consider skipping some videos. Now, I know what you're thinking. Wait a minute, I just paid for all these videos. I want to use them. I totally understand. I've been there. I know what it is to make that investment into the videos. But don't forget the curriculum buffet. It's not about stuffing yourself full of all of this material you bought. It's about having the resources and the tools that you need to accomplish the goal of education. And if the goal can be accomplished without all of the resources and tools, it's okay to skip some things here and there. So how do you decide which videos to skip? I understand that that can feel daunting. And again, you don't want to feel like you're letting your kid miss out on anything important. I get that. I'll just give you some examples of what we've done before. Let's say with reading. In 1st grade through 6th grade, there's a lot of reading. Reading is its own class, and then of course it's going to change over to literature in 7th grade. But in these younger grades, reading is a pretty substantial course. It usually takes the full 180 days the way BJU lays it out. And I think they actually have more on top of that if you want to use it. Well, one thing that I started noticing, and as much as I want my children to have a love for reading, reading as a subject was becoming kind of tedious. It was taking a long time. They were having a hard time just getting through the day with it. So what I started doing was looking for opportunities to skip videos with reading. I'll look through the video lesson guide. If you've already gotten your online order, your handouts and everything, then you're familiar with what the video lesson guide looks like. I would start looking where there would be many, many stories that would be spread out over 2 or 3 days, sometimes even longer. And I would say, okay, I want you to watch Mrs. Walker, who was one of our favorite reading teachers. I want you to watch Mrs. Walker for the first day of the story, but then on the second day, you don't have to watch the video. I just want you to read the segment and the section that they assigned, and then do the work text that goes along with it. Then on the third day, it'd be a give or take. If it was a really heavy work week, I might not make them watch the third day of the story. If it was a little bit of a lighter week, maybe they could go ahead and pick the video back up and watch that. I always liked to have the video for the introduction to the story, kind of like lay out some expectations, establish the setting, kind of clue the kid in on some of the things that might not have been as obvious. And then if possible, maybe have that video at the end to sort of wind it up. But when it was spread out, especially over 3 days or more, I felt like we could sacrifice some of that screen time instruction for the middle of the stories, if that makes sense. Another thing we've done is we have skipped videos a lot in certain subjects like spelling or handwriting. I eventually got to where I just stopped using the videos for handwriting. Once my children knew how to form the letters, I felt like they're in those early grades of K-5, first grade, maybe second grade. They're really still learning to form the letters. And then after that, it's really practice. They're doing a lot of practice until you get to the point of teaching cursive. And I get that that's another thing to teach and to learn. But that whole interim there of practicing, I didn't feel like we needed a 10 or 15 minute video in our day for handwriting. So I got to where I just cut those out unless they wanted to watch them for some reason, or we had extra time or something. And I just used the handwriting workbooks. Even if I've bought the full grade kit and I know those videos are there, I know we have access to them, but to me, it's more about keeping us on a sustainable pace than it is trying to shove every component into our day. So that's some of the ways that we have determined ways to just skip some of the videos and let them be. As far as spelling goes, BJU tends to follow a 5-day format with spelling. Well, we've always done a 4-day work week. So something's got to give somewhere. Either we're going to get off track with the way the weeks are laid out, or we're going to have to squeeze some things together. So sometimes I might have my child watch the video for the first day of the new list where the teacher's giving the pre-test on the words and kind of talking through some things. And then maybe we'd skip some videos on the in-between, have them come back and let the teacher do that final test at the end of the week with them. I hope that's making sense. If you're familiar already with the layout of BJU spelling, then you should be tracking with me. If not, then as you get into it, it'll make more sense, I assure you. So far, we've talked about playback speed, we've talked about shortening assignments, and we've talked about sometimes just skipping videos altogether to take some of that chunk out of your day. The fourth tip, and this would take a little more forethought on your part and just strategizing how you want to approach this, but it's to evaluate the emphasis that you put on various subjects. So for example, it's very common, especially in the elementary grades, to have 7 subjects, which is a pretty significant load, okay? But BJU offers spelling, English, math, science, heritage studies, reading, handwriting, and then if you want to add on Bible as an elective. 8 subjects. And then when you get to high school, yeah, you're trading out reading for literature. You might add in a foreign language. You drop spelling and handwriting, but you've still got plenty of workload to do there, right? So what I have found that works for us is to put a heavier emphasis on the things that I feel matter the most. And I will be very upfront with you. To me, math and English matter the most, with science right behind it. I wouldn't blame you at all if you said science needed to be right up there with those. I get that. Now, if you're a history buff, you might be offended that I didn't put heritage studies in that top 2 or 3 list. I'm getting there, okay? Just stay with me. But again, keep in mind that homeschooling is about you setting the priorities for your child. So your priorities may look a little different than mine. For me, I'm an author, I am a proofreader, I am a grammar enthusiast, and I want my kids to know proper grammar. It bugs me when people let all of these things fly on social media and they're spelled wrong and the punctuation's wrong. And I'm not saying things have to be perfect, but when we have, 25-year-olds who still don't know your and your, or there, and there, that bugs me. I feel like somebody failed us at some point if we couldn't teach our kids some of these common things, some of these words that we use all the time. So for me, that's a priority. Now, I know that's not going to have the same kind of weight with everybody that it does for me. For me, math, a good basic working knowledge of math is a priority. Now, I'm not a purist to the extreme. I do let my kids use calculators after they know basic math facts. I make them get pretty comfortable, obviously, with adding and subtracting, but even with their multiplication tables, I want them to have some of these things at their fingertips, so to speak, but also understanding that, we were told growing up that, oh, well, you won't always have a calculator handy. And what do you know? We always have a calculator handy. So I'm going to be realistic too with my kids, and I'm going to try not to put unrealistic expectations on them. But I do think it's important for them to be able to do a pretty decent level of math and do it well. I think it's important for them to at least have a working knowledge of how to calculate percentages and know what it means when someone says, oh, we're having a 25% off sale, or come on and get a BOGO 50, and how BOGO 50 is not the same as BOGO. And, I think that there are things that are real life skills that come from achievement in math. Now, of course, the other thing is, I don't know what fields that my children are going to end up going into, and they may need a very comprehensive understanding of math. They may need a very comprehensive understanding of science. So I want to give them the foundation that sets them up in these three areas for me: English, math, and then closely behind science. Now, how does that affect my school day? Well, here's how. I decided a while back to dial back the emphasis that I was putting on heritage studies. I'll explain that in a minute. To dial back the emphasis that I was putting on vocabulary and handwriting and some of these things that are excellent to be skilled at, but don't necessarily need the same weight of our attention. Let's talk about heritage studies, because really that would typically belong in the top 4. Here's my approach to heritage studies, and it's made a huge difference in our homeschool environment. I was talking with a homeschool mom that was a friend of mine several years ago, and she had educated, I think, all of her 8 children through homeschool. So I knew she had the experience to back up what she was saying. So she made mention to me that she doesn't even teach history or, I believe, science, which was kind of mind-boggling. Now, keep in mind, her family traveled tons, and her children were exposed to educational opportunities all the time that my kids aren't exposed to. So it wasn't that I necessarily agreed that I would want to do that in my school. I wouldn't want to eliminate history and science in our homeschool, but it did make me think, I didn't even really know you could do that. Just choose not to teach something. And what I got to thinking was this: with heritage studies, which is what BJU refers to instead of history or social studies, I really want my children to be exposed to the plethora of events that got us to the place we are now. I want them to understand what humanity has been through. I want them to understand what's gone well, what hasn't. I want them to understand different cultures, things like that. What I don't want to emphasize too much is rote memorization of these facts. When I was in school, I actually did really well at school, and I aced all of my history courses. But I was forced to memorize what date this battle started, or what date this battle ended, or where did this take place, or what's a line from a speech that this president said, or whatever the case may be. And there were so many details that we were required to memorize. And I would memorize them, and I would walk in and I would ace the test, and I would walk out and forget all of those details. Couldn't tell you half of them now, if even I wouldn't even come close to it. I don't fault my teachers for the way they taught us history, but I began to realize in evaluating our homeschool that, what's more important to me is that my kids have an enjoyable time reading about history and understanding what happened, not necessarily that they did all of this busy work of writing out essays and answering questions and memorizing all these facts. So we changed entirely our approach to history. Even if I buy a full grade kit of online with books from BJU, I am not using the Heritage Studies work text, and I'm most likely not using the Heritage Studies videos. Not because they aren't valuable, but because I'm having to weigh out where does our time need to be spent. And I'm not going to spend 7 hours a day in the school books. I'm not going to spend that much on our school day. We're going to shave it down and we're going to learn what we need to learn. And I don't want my kids to get bogged down like they were with heritage studies. They had gotten to where they dreaded doing heritage studies because it took so long in their day. They had to watch the video, they had to read the the student text segment, and then they had to do the work text assignment. Sometimes they had to do research papers on top of that. It was something that wasn't fun for them. And I want them, if they're going to learn history, if they're going to learn heritage studies, I want it to be enjoyable for them. So now I get this approach is not going to be for everybody, and it's completely okay if you don't agree with it and you don't want to do that for your homeschool. But I am telling you that that has made a difference in the time that we spend in our school day. So if you take that same approach and apply it to other subjects, you can find where you can shave off time just by changing what you prioritize. So hopefully that gives you some freedom to evaluate and to change things as you need to fit your homeschool. And as long as you have the curriculum buffet mentality, you're not going to be focused on what you're losing by this investment that you put into it. You're going to be focused on what you're gaining by making the best use of the tools that you have purchased. Now, I'm going to give you one last bonus tip. And this is going to be something, if you thought I was crazy in the last tip, you might really think I'm crazy here. But we actually morphed into what I call an ultra block schedule. Over the last few years, I found out that my kids do really well when they can put a lot of attention and emphasis on one or two subjects for the day, and then not even pay attention to the other subjects until later. The difference between a traditional block schedule and ours is that we don't alternate Monday, Wednesday, Friday with Tuesday, Thursday. We don't even alternate week by week. We actually just go hardcore with one or two subjects, completely knock them out, and then start the next ones. So I may, by 10th grade, the full kit, like I did for my son earlier this year, and he's already done with some subjects, he's in the middle of others, and he hasn't even started the others because he's really capitalizing on momentum. And what we have found is by doing that, you can actually get more done in a shorter amount of time. Now, it makes it a little trickier if you're someone who likes to schedule out your day and you want this block of time to be breakfast and this block of time to be spelling and this block of time to be English. You know, it's going to be trickier to try to balance it out when you're focusing solely on one or two subjects. So what we tend to do is if I have bought him a grade level that has 5 subjects in it, then his goal is to try to get 5 lessons done that day. That doesn't always mean they're all with videos, but he knows kind of where he can take the liberties. Granted, he's in 10th grade, he's 13 years old, so he has a good handle on that now, and he's very independent at this point, as is his older sister. So it's something that you may have to work with the younger ones on, but even my younger boys love it. They love being able to go after what they're really excited about right now. And yeah, that means later on they're going to have to come back and hit the subjects they're not as crazy about, but it really evens out in the long run. We love it. It's not for everyone, but if you have any questions about it, feel free to leave them in the comments and I'll be happy to speak to that as well. So I hope that this has been helpful for you to give you just some basic tips that you can implement, some of them right away, to start making up some time in your day so that you can really enjoy your homeschool journey and enjoy the time that you have with your kids, that your day doesn't have to be spent in the books from morning to evening. Absolutely not. If you found this helpful, please like, subscribe, and share. And then I want to invite you to check out my free resources for parents who are just starting out at wiserhomeschool.com/ebook. I have a free ebook about confidence in starting your homeschool. At wiserhomeschool.com/worksheet, I have a free curriculum budget planning worksheet that you can download, print off, and use at your disposal. And then I have some other paid resources that are there to help you in your homeschool journey, because as we all know, the reason we're doing all of this is because our kids deserve better. I'll see you soon.